we were having lunch. The usual buzz of the food court, the chatter, laughter, scraping trays, wrapped around us like a familiar soundtrack. I told them I'd be right back, just needed a moment alone. A quick break from the noise. The restroom was down a side corridor, past a shuttered kiosk and an empty bench where a few stray flyers lay scattered in the stale air. The smell hit me first, cleaner mixed with something sour, like forgotten food left to rot in a corner. I pushed open the bathroom door. Fluorescent lights flickered unevenly overhead, buzzing low and constant. The tiled floor was cracked and stained, the grout darkened with years of neglect. I washed my hands slowly, letting the cold water steady the slight tremor in my fingers. The mirror was smeared with grime, its edges cloudy and dull. For a heartbeat, I thought I caught movement behind me, a shadow shifting just out of focus. I spun around. Nothing. The corridor outside was empty, not just quiet. Empty. No footsteps, no voices, no sign of life. The walls stretched longer than memory allowed. Paint peeled softly at the edges, like skin curling from a wound. The carpet, once thick and patterned, was threadbare and stained in places I didn't recognize. The lights buzzed louder, flickering with a maddening rhythm. I called out, voice low and steady. "Hello?" No answer. I moved faster, turning corners, checking doors that opened only onto more endless hallways. The layout was wrong, impossible. Doors led nowhere or folded back on themselves, halls curling like a snake, biting its tail. My breath caught, the weight of the silence pressed deep inside my chest. I pulled my phone from my pocket. No signal. The battery blinked low, though I'd charged it hours ago. I reached the food court. The tables and chairs sat empty, lined up like markers in a graveyard. The usual clutter, napkins, crumbs, half-empty cups, was gone, wiped clean as if erased by an unseen hand. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. Maybe I'd lost track of time. Maybe they'd gone on without me. But the silence pressed in, thick and cold, wrapping around me like a shroud. Something waited, something unseen. I could feel it behind me, just beyond the edge of my vision. My skin prickled, hairs standing on end. I wanted to turn to look, to face what was there just beyond sight. But something stopped me, a quiet sinking fear, too heavy, too real to fight. So I kept moving, alone, trapped, watched. I moved through the empty halls, my footsteps hollow echoes, swallowed by the stillness. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered unevenly, casting a weak, harsh glow that stripped color from everything, leaving walls washed out and lifeless. The colors weren't colors anymore, just muted shades of gray and pale yellow, like a photograph faded by too much sun, drained of warmth and meaning. The ceiling tiles sagged in places, stained with age and neglect. The faint hum of the ventilation system buzzed low, an unsteady drone that seemed to pulse with the air itself. The cold bit deep, sharper than any winter's chill. It settled in my lungs with every breath, drying my throat, making each inhale shallow and deliberate. The usual scents, fresh food, the perfume of strangers, the faint spice of roasted nuts were gone. Only a sour, stale tang lingered, like the air trapped beneath plastic tarps, too long folded away. I called out softly, voice trembling, breaking the silence that felt thicker than concrete. "Is anyone here?" No answer. No footsteps. No voices. Just me and something else. The mall felt less like a place and more like a tomb, empty, but conscious. It held its breath, waiting. I rounded a corner and froze. The kiosk where we'd been sitting, once cluttered with magazines and souvenirs, was bare. No counters, no receipts, no lost coins, no hint that people had ever been here. The benches, usually dotted with tired shoppers, sat empty. The fabric was threadbare, stained in places I couldn't recognize. The silence was absolute. Even the digital maps flickered erratically, some sections missing, others looping endlessly like a broken record. I pulled my phone from my pocket. No signal. The battery warning blinked red. The silence pressed tighter, curling into my skin like cold water seeping through every crack. I moved faster now, eyes darting to every shadow, every corner. In a cracked security monitor, I caught it, a shadow lingering just beyond focus, flickering in and out of sight. Not quite a shape, not quite a person. It shifted and folded like smoke, impossible to pin down. I blinked. Gone. My pulse hammered in my temples. I forced myself to shake it off. A trick of the light, but the dread settled deeper, curling in my bones. The walls seemed to breathe, contracting and stretching, closing in and expanding all at once. The air hummed with faint static. Broken fragments of a PA announcement looped and faltered. Words I couldn't understand. Whispers beneath whispers. I turned another corner. There it was, a black shape, pressed flat against the stained tile floor, darker than shadow, like a stain that shouldn't be there. I stared, heart thudding. I glanced around. Corridors stretched silent and endless in every direction. It didn't belong. A soft breath brushed past my ear, deliberate, close. I didn't look back. Couldn't. Every nerve screamed to run. But the halls twisted impossibly, folding back on themselves like a maze without exit. I was alone, trapped and being watched. The silence didn't loosen its grip. If anything, it tightened, folding around me like thick cloth that pressed against skin and bone. I moved through the hallways again, but this time slower, careful, like I might shatter if I hurried. The air had grown colder, sharper, as if it were breathing through cracked windows. I couldn't see. Each step felt louder, the echo bouncing off walls that shouldn't have been this close, this narrow. I reached out, brushing my fingers along the peeling wallpaper. Its pattern faded, curling at the edges like something dying. The texture was rough beneath my skin, a reminder that this place wasn't just abandoned, it was decaying. I stopped at a door. It was heavier than the others, the handle cold and sticky. like it hadn't been touched in years. I twisted it slowly, expecting resistance. It creaked open, but led nowhere. Just more walls. More empty halls stretching past where my eyes could reach. No windows, no light from outside. Nothing but this claustrophobic maze. My breath came out in short bursts. I tried to steady it. Tried to remember how I'd gotten here. But the memory slipped away like smoke between fingers. I could see the lunch table where I'd been moments before, the plates, the chatter, but it felt like a memory someone else had left behind. I called out, just a whisper at first. Hello? No answer. Only the distant hum of flickering lights overhead, weak and uneven. The buzzing made the silence worse, like a reminder that this place was alive in some wrong way. I walked faster now, heart pounding so loud it drowned out every other sound. My feet scraped the cracked tiles, the soles worn thin. I rounded a corner and stopped short. There, just at the edge of the light, something moved. A shadow, darker than the dark around it, shifting silently. It didn't have shape or form, just an absence. A hole in the space that felt wrong. I blinked and it was gone. My pulse stuttered. I kept walking, but every corner held the same presence. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting, folding in on themselves, like lungs struggling for air. I tried to find a door, a window, anything that led outside, but every handle was locked, every door heavy and unyielding. The exit signs flickered weakly, their green glow barely lighting the way, more a cruel tease than a guide. Time stretched and twisted. My phone lay dead in my pocket, its screen black and useless. I tried to remember the last time it worked, the last time anything felt normal. I felt eyes watching me. Not a person's eyes, but something darker, colder. A weight pressing down just beyond the edge of perception. Every shadow seemed alive, every silence waiting. I tried to scream, but only a dry sound came out. I was trapped, not just in this place, trapped inside myself, and the watching was endless. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It had weight, a dense presence pressing in from every direction, folding around me like thick fog. I reached for my phone again, heart clutching with a fragile hope that maybe this time something had changed. The screen was blank, no bars, no signal, no calls, just cold, unyielding glass and plastic. My lifeline had turned into a dead weight in my palm. I shoved it back into my pocket, the numbness spreading through my fingers. I turned to face the walls. They had shifted, the faded paint peeled in larger, curling strips, edges brittle and sharp, the plaster cracked deeper, jagged lines weaving like scars beneath the buzzing fluorescent lights that flickered unevenly overhead. The air was thick now, dry but harder to breathe, like inhaling dust and static. My eyes flicked to the nearest door. It wasn't just locked, it was sealed, welded shut, with a heavy metal plate that gleamed faintly in the flickering light. I pressed my hands against the cold surface, knuckles whitening, but it didn't budge. No give, no promise of escape. panic prickled under my skin. I moved down the hall, testing every door I passed. Locked, blocked, some even bricked up from the other side, the mortar dry and cracked. Others opened only to reveal endless corridors, twisting and folding back on themselves like a snake biting its own tail. One door led to a stairwell. The cold metal railing was rusted and loose. I took a step down, but the stairs crumbled halfway. The rest collapsed into a pit of darkness I couldn't see past. The thought of climbing back up made my limbs shake. I stayed rooted at the edge, staring into the void. I swallowed hard and kept moving, every footfall slower, heavier, my heart hammering against ribs that felt too tight. The sound echoed through the hollow spaces like a warning. My breath came ragged, sharp, and quick. I called out, voice cracking, barely more than a whisper. "Hello?" Only silence answered. Thick, mocking silence. I passed a row of windows that were smudged and grimy. Beyond them was nothing, just a thick, impenetrable gray fog, swallowing every trace of light. No sky, no city, no promise of escape. I pressed my face to the glass, the cold seeping into my skin. I tried to see past the fog, to pierce the endless gray, but it was like staring through a veil into nothingness. No one there, no way out. A shudder ran through me, cold and sudden. The weight of isolation pressed down, heavier than the air itself, wrapping around me like a shroud I couldn't shed. I realized I hadn't seen another person since I'd left the food court. No footsteps echoed behind or ahead. No voices whispered in the distance. No signs of life. Only me, trapped inside this sprawling maze of silence and shadow. My breath was uneven, a storm of sharp inhales and ragged exhales. I pressed my back to the wall, arms wrapped tight around myself, eyes flicking to every shadow, every flicker of light. The stillness wasn't empty. It whispered just beyond hearing, a low, barely there hum, like breath exhaled slowly, deliberately, close enough to chill my skin. I blinked, and the hall stretched out longer, darker. The flickering lights dimmed further, casting shadows that lengthened and twined like slow, crawling fingers across the cracked floor. I shook my head, trying to clear the growing weight in my chest, but the feeling remained. Something was watching from the dark edges, waiting. I reached for the next door, locked. Desperation broke through the quiet restraint I'd clung to so far. My fist pounded the cold metal, each strike hollow and weak. "Please," I whispered, voice trembling. "Help." My words bounced back at me, hollow, unkind. No answer. I sank to the floor, legs folded tight, head bowed, back pressed hard against the wall. I was alone, trapped. No one was coming. And the cold, endless watch of this place was only beginning. The silence changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was a presence, thin, near, pressing in just beyond hearing, a low vibration in the air, like breath exhaled slowly in the dark. It felt less like sound, and more like a weight settling into the shadows. I stopped moving and listened. The faintest whisper traced the edges of my thoughts, an echo of words I couldn't catch. The tone was neither angry nor kind. It was something older, patient, waiting. My skin prickled, hairs rising, as if the air itself held a secret meant only for me. I wanted to tell myself it was nothing. An echo bouncing off cracked walls, the hum of broken wiring. But the dread was real, thickening like smoke in my lungs. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. My breath was shallow, trapped under a glass dome. I took a step forward, then another. The floor beneath me cold and cracked. The lights overhead flickered, their buzz lowering into a dull drone, syncing with the whisper's rhythm. The shadows shifted, pooling thicker, darker. The corridor narrowed, walls leaning in like they were watching me. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, curling as though breathing out a slow sigh. My fingers grazed the rough texture, tracing the delicate decay of the place, the slow death unfolding in silence. I tried to remember how long I'd been here. Minutes, hours, the line blurred, time folding in on itself. I knew I wasn't alone. The air was too charged, too alive. It pressed closer, like a presence just beyond touch. I closed my eyes for a moment, willing the whisper away. But it only grew louder, twisting through my mind. The words teased me, almost clear, then slipping through my fingers like water. I thought about calling out again, but the voice in my throat felt strangled, swallowed by the weight of the space. The hallway seemed endless, stretching farther than memory should allow. I stopped at a broken window and pressed my palm to the glass. Outside, the world was swallowed by gray fog, still and silent. No movement, no hope. The whisper coiled around me, wrapping tighter, a cold breath close, enough to feel on my skin. It wasn't a voice, it was a presence, an echo of something watching, waiting, and unyielding. I wanted to run, to scream, to break the spell holding me here, but my legs wouldn't move. I was caught, a thread tangled in invisible hands. The flickering lights dimmed, shadows pooling into a single dark shape just beyond the corner of my eye. I turned, but nothing was there, only the silence, heavy and watching. I pressed my back to the wall, trying to steady the shaking of my hands, my breath coming fast and shallow. The whisper lingered, an impossible weight in the stillness. I was alone, trapped, being watched. The cold came first, not the usual chill of an air-conditioned mall or a draft slipping under a door. This was different, a sudden, sharp drop in temperature that settled into my bones, an invisible weight pressing the breath from my lungs. I shivered, pulling my jacket tighter, but it did nothing. I wasn't alone. I could feel it, something close, just beyond sight. The kind of presence that makes your skin crawl, the hair on your neck stand on end. The windows along the hall fogged up, a thin mist creeping slowly from the edges inward, as if something breathed too near. I stopped and pressed my palm flat against the cold glass, fingertips slick with condensation. Outside, the gray fog still swallowed everything. No shapes, no movement, just silence. But inside, the air felt thick, almost tangible. A shadow flickered, just past my peripheral vision, quick, gone before I could focus, too fast to be anything real, or maybe just too real for me to face. I tried to steady my breath, slow it down, but the sharp cold made my lungs ache. My footsteps echoed louder than before, hollow and ragged, swallowed by the vast emptiness. The corridor ahead stretched impossibly long, the walls seeming to lean closer, the ceiling sagging as if weighed down. The light overhead dimmed and brightened unevenly, flickering with an erratic pulse. A sudden gust brushed past me, not a draft, but a deliberate breath, cold and sharp as a blade. I turned, heart hammering, eyes scanning the shadows, but nothing moved. Nothing except the fogged windows, the flickering light, and the slow, sinking feeling that something was closing in. The shadows lengthened, twisting across the cracked tile floor like dark fingers stretching out to touch me. I caught movement in the corner of my eye, a dark shape slipping behind a pillar, too still to be natural, too fleeting to focus on. The air vibrated with a low hum, like static ringing in my ears, pressing against my temples. I swallowed hard, fighting the rising panic. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but the maze of halls seemed to shift beneath my feet, folding in on itself, the exit signs flickering and blinking out one by one. The presence felt almost physical now, like a heavy weight leaning close, pressing warm breath against my skin despite the cold. I reached out tentatively, fingers trembling, trying to grasp the emptiness. But there was nothing, only silence, only waiting. I stepped forward, the fog trailing behind me. Every step echoed with the sound of my own dread. The cold clung to me, a shadow wrapping tighter and tighter. I wanted to cry, to scream, to break free, but the presence held me still, unyielding, patient. I was caught in its gaze, trapped in its endless watch. No escape, no relief, only the creeping, suffocating presence, and the cold that would not leave. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was a living thing, folding in around me like a thick, suffocating fog. Every breath I took sounded deafening, sharp and ragged, like the distant crash of waves in an empty cave. I tried to steady it, tried to slow my breathing to will the noise away, but it only grew louder, each inhale a thunderclap, each exhale a gasp that echoed off the stained walls. I froze in place, pressed my hands against the cold tile floor, fingers trembling. The mall had vanished into a frozen moment, every sound swallowed whole. No footsteps echoed down the endless halls. No whisper stirred the heavy air. No rustle of fabric. No click of heels. Just silence, sliding into every crack and seam. I blinked, willing the world to sharpen, to come back into focus. But the shadows clung to the edges of my vision, like thick smoke, dark and immovable. I tried to move, slow and deliberate. Every step weighted with dread. The silence stretched out like a void, swallowing everything in its path. I reached for the nearest wall, tracing the rough paint beneath my fingertips. The texture was a lifeline, the only proof I was still here, still real. still breathing. Or so I hoped. My thoughts tangled, twisting into tight knots of fear and confusion. Was this silence real? Or a trick of my mind fraying at the edges? Was I losing touch with what was outside me and what was inside? My heartbeat thundered in my chest, thudding loud enough to shatter the quiet. I closed my eyes, willing the noise inside me to stop. But it wouldn't. Instead, the silence deepened. It pressed in on my ears, numbing my senses. The air grew colder, thick and heavy, like a shroud settling over my shoulders. I opened my eyes again. The hall stretched endlessly before me, pale and washed out. The ceiling tiles sagged like tired lungs, the flickering lights buzzing low, unstable. Colors bled from the world, the faded wallpaper, the cracked linoleum, the dull metal of the fire exit signs. Everything was drained. I felt smaller, swallowed by the vast, empty space. A sudden rush of loneliness hit me hard. I curled into myself, pressing my back against the wall, my legs folded tightly, arms wrapped around my knees. I rocked gently, trying to keep myself together, but the silence waited. It watched. It held its breath. I realized then that this wasn't just quiet. It was a presence, invisible but absolute, a shadow in the spaces between moments, a weight that pressed down, crushing. I tried to call out. My voice caught in my throat. Only a dry rasp escaped. The silence didn't answer. It didn't need to. It was already here, already inside me, and I was running out of time. The hallways twisted beneath my feet like a living thing. I didn't just walk anymore. I stumbled through a maze that rearranged itself with every breath I took, every frantic glance behind me. My pulse was a drum-beating chaos in my ears, drowning out everything else except the growing weight pressing close behind me. Unseen but impossibly real, it was there, hunting, cold and patient, relentless. I ran, not knowing where I was going, not knowing if anywhere meant safety. The walls stretched and folded like paper in the dark, swallowing light and sense. Each corner I rounded looped me back to places I'd already fled from, corridors that shimmered and warped, as if painted by trembling hands. The fluorescent bulbs overhead cracked and sputtered, buzzing sharp and unpredictable, threatening to plunge everything into darkness. My breath came ragged and shallow. The air was thick but brittle, tasting of dust and stale fear. My limbs felt heavy, like I was running through water. But every second, that weight behind me grew closer. I screamed inside my head, but my voice was gone, swallowed by the vast silence that filled the space around me. No footsteps followed. No voice called after me. Only the cold presence, a shadow tethered to my skin, creeping, crawling, watching. My mind fractured. The edges of reality blurred. I couldn't tell if the shadows shifting in the corners were real or imagined. Was that a door ahead, or just another folding wall? Had I passed this place before, or was it new? The memories of how I came here twisted, fragmented like broken glass. I pressed my palms to my face, trying to steady myself, trying to breathe through the panic clawing at my throat. But the silence screamed louder. I was completely alone, vulnerable, trapped in a place that was no longer just a building, but a living prison, constructed from fear itself. Each heartbeat was a countdown, each breath a fragile thread holding me together. I could feel it right there, its cold breath on the back of my neck, its watchful presence just beyond sight. I wanted to run faster, to disappear into the maze forever. But there was no escape, only endless corridors folding into darkness, only the whisper of footsteps that were never mine. I was lost, and the pursuit was infinite. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was dense, thick with waiting, watching, and something impossibly close, just beyond my reach. I moved slower now, every step measured, every breath cautious, like the air itself might betray me. The walls around me seemed to lean in closer, the chipped paint and cracked tiles suddenly sharper, harsher. My fingers trailed along the rough plaster, as if it might anchor me to something real. And then it came, a sudden brush of air. I froze. My heart thundered, each beat echoing in ribs that felt too tight, constricted. A coldness spiraled up the back of my neck, crawling down my spine like ice, seeping into dark, forgotten places. I wanted to turn, to find it, to see what was there, but something heavier, darker pressed down, swallowing the instinct whole. A faint sensation on my arm, delicate, almost tender, like fingertips grazing a surface that wasn't meant to be touched. No shadow, no shape, no form, just the touch, that ambiguous presence that was both there and not. I pulled my arms tight around myself, fingers digging into skin, as if I could shove the feeling away. Stillness wasn't peace, it was pressure. It pressed in with every ragged breath, filling the space until it felt like it might crack my chest. The walls stopped being walls. They curled like long, slow fingers, narrowing the space I could move, the space I could breathe. In a broken mirror, my reflection caught the dim light, pale, hollow-eyed, trembling like a ghost. I whispered to the emptiness, voice thin and cracked, "Is someone there?" Silence, only silence answered, only the cold weight of my own fear, reverberating back through the hollow halls. Every nerve screamed at me something was there, watching, waiting, but I was utterly, horribly alone. No hand to hold, no voice to call out, no light to follow, only the relentless, near touch of a presence that wanted me to know. I was trapped, vulnerable, completely seen, the line between reality and terror frayed, twisting until they became one indistinguishable thing. I stood there, broken, silent, waiting, but the waiting broke. A sudden, cold wave surged through me, ripping the quiet apart. My breath hitched, my limbs tensed. I couldn't stay. I had to run. I ran. The cracked tiles thundered beneath my pounding feet. My breath tore through my chest, sharp and ragged, desperate for air. Every nerve screamed to flee faster, farther, anywhere but here. The corridors twisted and stretched beneath me, walls bending and folding like they were alive, warping my senses. No light, no sound, only the heavy weight behind me, the presence, relentless, growing. It pressed closer, a silent shadow that didn't chase, only waited, closer with every heartbeat, every ragged gasp. The air thickened, cold and sharp like frost biting deep, suffocating, merciless. Ahead, a door cracked open, a thin promise of refuge. I didn't hesitate. I threw myself inside and slammed it shut behind me. The room was small. Bare concrete walls, closed in like the jaws of a tomb. The stale scent of dust and damp was thick in the choking air. I pressed my back to the door, knees pulled tight, lungs burning, heart pounding, loud enough to drown out everything. Silence should have been a comfort, but it wasn't. It was worse. A silence so complete it felt like the room itself was holding its breath, waiting to crush me. Then the walls moved, slowly at first, like a beast exhaling. But then the pressure grew, crawling into my skin, sinking into my bones. The concrete pulsed and breathed with cruel intent, narrowing the space, folding the air away. The ceiling lowered. The walls crept inward cold, unyielding, unforgiving. Shadows curled and lengthened like black fingers, crawling across the cracked floor, wrapping tighter and tighter around me. I tried to scream. I tried to tear the silence with sound, but no noise came, just a dry rasp, caught and lost in my throat. I clawed at the walls, fingertips scraping plaster, paint crumbling to dust beneath my nails. The rough edges bit deep, but the pain was distant, numb beneath the overwhelming pressure. The air grew thicker. Each breath was a battle, each inhale a desperate fight against the chokehold squeezing my lungs. My ribs pressed inward, crushed beneath the walls, pushing ever closer. Panic seized me. My heart hammered wildly as darkness crept in at the edges of my vision. I realized, with a sickening clarity, that I was suffocating slowly, painfully, mercilessly. This was it. The last breath, fighting to escape, squeezed out by unforgiving concrete and shadow. The presence watched, dark, patient, unblinking. It didn't need to move. Its silence was enough. Between life and death, between fight and surrender, the line blurred and vanished. I wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but my voice was gone. The walls closed in, folding out the last sliver of light. The space shrank until I was nothing but cold shadow and silence. Alone, trapped, completely seen, and swallowed whole.